I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, typing out my life's mess for the world to see. But here I am, a husband betrayed, trying to make sense of it all. My name is Jake, and I've been married to Rachel for 8 years. We had what I thought was a solid life together. A nice house in a decent neighborhood, two adorable kids, and a shared love for binge-watching crime shows late at night. It was the kind of life you see in a glossy magazine, until it was. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Rachel, once my partner in crime, figuratively speaking, started to drift away. She became distant, lost in her phone, her laughter replaced by a pensive silence. I chalked it up to the stresses of work and being a mom. After all, she had her hands full managing the kids, and there were days I felt overwhelmed too. But that nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I noticed she spent more time in front of the mirror, her outfits were more revealing, and she was suddenly interested in exercising, which, frankly, was out of character for her. Then came the late nights. Rachel had taken up some new project at work, something that required her to stay late. I wanted to be supportive, but the excuses started to pile up and my trust began to fray. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I found myself scrolling through her social media. I wasn't proud of it, but I felt justified. What I found didn't just confirm my suspicions, it shattered my heart. The first indication was a comment on her latest post from a guy named Mark. "Can't wait to see you again. You're breathtaking." Breathtaking, really? I confronted her about it and she laughed it off, claiming Mark was just a friend from work. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then I noticed the text messages. Her phone would light up at odd hours, and when I asked who was messaging her, she would shut down, change the subject, or snap at me. The change in her demeanor was striking. She was becoming a stranger in our home. One Sunday afternoon, the kids were playing in the backyard, and I decided to take a peek at her phone while she was in the kitchen. My heart raced as I opened her messages. What I found felt like a punch to the gut. Flirty exchanges filled with inside jokes and emojis that had no place in our marriage. My hands were shaking as I read texts that made it clear this wasn't just a friendship. They were meeting up. She had even told him she loved him. I felt like I'd been blindfolded and spun around, only to be shoved off a cliff. Facing the truth was unbearable. It was like being thrust into a nightmare, knowing that I had to confront the very person I loved most. I took a deep breath and decided to approach her. It was time for a conversation that would change everything. I walked into the kitchen where she was stirring a pot of something that smelled delicious. "Rachel, we need to talk," I said, my voice wavering. She turned around, her eyes darting nervously. "What's up?" she asked, feigning a nonchalant attitude while I could see the gears turning in her head. I pulled out my phone, showing her the messages. Her face paled as I laid everything bare. "Who the hell is Mark?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Instead of falling apart, she put on a mask of defiance. "Jake, it's not what you think," she said, her tone dripping with defensiveness. "He's just a friend, you're being paranoid." Her excuses flowed like water, each one more ridiculous than the last. She claimed that I was just being insecure, that she only went out with him for work-related things. The lies poured out like a broken faucet, and I felt my heart hardening with rage. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a battlefield where the stakes were my heart and our family. I stood there, fighting back tears, feeling the cracks form in my once ideal life. The emotional impact hit me like a freight train. I had spent years loving this woman, building a home and raising kids. How could she betray me like this? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. But all I could manage was to stare at her, watching her flounder in her web of deceit. The confrontation ended with her insisting I was overreacting, that I was misunderstanding everything. But deep down, I knew the truth. And as I walked away from that kitchen, I felt the weight of my decision looming over me. I had a choice to make, and whatever came next would define not just our marriage but my own sense of self-worth. I was torn between love and betrayal, and the road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a tumultuous journey toward revenge and, ultimately, self-discovery. After that explosive confrontation with Rachel, I felt a strange mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. I needed time to process everything. I gave Rachel the silent treatment for a few days, which she seemed to interpret as a passing phase. She continued her routine as if nothing significant had happened, and I couldn't help but feel even more isolated. To her, it seemed like life could just go on. But for me, it was like living in a fog. During those days, I took a hard look at our relationship. I replayed every moment, the good times that now felt tainted by her betrayal, the laughter that had turned into silence, and the intimacy that had vanished into thin air. I began to spiral into a rabbit hole of questions. How long had this been going on? Had she ever truly loved me? All those memories felt like a cruel joke, and I was the punchline. I spent hours on the couch, scrolling through social media and reading about other people's experiences with infidelity. It was both comforting and painful. Comforting because I realized I wasn't alone in this mess, but painful because it brought my own situation back to the forefront of my mind. I learned that betrayal can manifest in countless ways, and the emotional toll it takes on a person can be devastating. Friends and family would often say that the best revenge is to live well, but at that moment, I wasn't sure how to live at all. Then came the moment I stumbled across something that made my blood boil. A few of Rachel's old college friends had gotten back in touch with her through a group chat. I found her phone lying on the kitchen counter while she was busy in the bedroom. I couldn't resist checking it again. In this group chat, the conversation quickly turned to how she was supposedly exploring new things with Mark. They were discussing their secret adventures, and it was clear this was more than just an emotional affair, it was physical. My heart sank, and I felt rage bubbling up inside me. I realized I had to take action, but my plan wasn't about confronting her again. No, I wanted to gather evidence. I wanted to watch her unravel, to see her fail at this charade. I thought of a way to collect proof of her infidelity, something that would make it undeniable. The idea twisted in my mind, fueled by my anger and the desire for revenge. I wanted Rachel to see how her actions could crumble her world, so I started to gather information. I began following her discreetly. It felt wrong, but it also felt necessary. I became a ghost in my own life, blending into the background while she went about her days. I followed her to the gym, where she often claimed to work out, only to see her meet up with Mark instead. The two of them shared flirtatious glances and laughter that cut through my heart like a knife. I watched, hidden behind parked cars, waiting for the right moment to capture everything on my phone. The irony of my situation hit me hard. I was a husband spying on his wife, the very person I had trusted with my life. Yet here I was, feeling justified in my actions. Each time I saw them together, it ignited a fire in me, not just anger, but a sense of purpose. I was going to expose her for who she really was. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal. After a few weeks of this cat-and-mouse game, I finally caught them in a situation that made my heart race with both adrenaline and despair. They were at a local cafe, laughing over coffee, and I could see the chemistry between them. I managed to snap a few photos, each one a dagger to the heart. I even recorded a short video of them holding hands across the table. It felt wrong to invade their moment, but I justified it by believing I was reclaiming my power. I returned home that day with a heavy heart but a sense of satisfaction. I had the proof I needed. I was no longer just the passive husband. I was the one in control of the narrative. Rachel had been playing games, and now it was my turn. The emotional impact of this new revelation began to settle in. I felt angry, yes, but there was also a sense of clarity. I didn't want to reconcile. I wanted her to feel the sting of her actions, to face the truth of what she had done. I was ready to confront her again, this time not as a victim, but as someone who had taken charge of his life. The moment I had to decide how to move forward came sooner than expected. One evening, Rachel returned home late, and I could see the guilt written all over her face. She tried to brush past me with a casual, "Hey, I didn't realize how late it was, but I wasn't going to let this slide." I called her name, and when she turned, I pulled out my phone, holding it up like a weapon. "Rachel, we need to talk about your friendship with Mark," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. This was it, the moment of truth where I'd finally show her the depths of her betrayal. I felt ready for the battle ahead, and I knew I wasn't going to back down. As Rachel stood before me, her eyes darting from my face to the phone in my hand, I could practically see the gears turning in her mind. A mix of confusion and dread washed over her as I took a deep breath, ready to unleash the storm of evidence I had gathered against her. "What is this, Jake?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, but I could see the facade of confidence beginning to crack. I didn't waste any time. I turned the phone around to show her the photos, the ones of her and Mark at the cafe, laughing and holding hands, looking completely at ease with one another. "This is what I want to talk about," I said, keeping my tone even as I tried to suppress the whirlwind of emotion swirling inside me. "You've been lying to me for months, haven't you?" Her reaction was almost instantaneous. The color drained from her face and she stumbled back a step as if the images were physical blows. "Jake, I can explain," she blurted out, her voice rising in pitch. "It's not what it looks like. We were just having coffee for work." The excuses flowed faster than I could process them, and I could see her panic rising. "Work?" I echoed incredulously, feeling anger boiling beneath the surface. "You think I'm going to believe that? I've seen the messages, Rachel. I know the truth. You can't keep lying, not anymore." I felt empowered holding the proof, but the hurt was still there, clawing at my insides. I was fighting for my dignity, and her attempts to downplay the situation only stoked the fire. "Look, Jake, I made a mistake, okay? It was just a phase," she pleaded, her voice cracking as she reached out toward me as if hopping to bridge the chasm between us. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could handle it, but I need you to understand." "Understand what?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Understand that you've been betraying me, that you've been leading a double life. This isn't some bad decision you can sweep under the rug." I could feel my heart racing, pounding against my chest like a caged animal. I was no longer the passive husband. I was the one holding the reins. Rachel's eyes glistened with tears, and for a moment I felt a flicker of pity. But then I remembered the images, the laughter, and the lies. "You have no idea how much this hurts, do you?" I said, my voice lowering as I tried to regain my composure. "You think you can just say you're sorry and everything will be fine. There's no going back from this." She opened her mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. I watched as the reality of her situation sank in. The steady facade she had kept up was crumbling, and it felt like a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. "I want the truth, Rachel. No more lies," I demanded, my voice firm. "How long has this been going on?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she finally relented. "A few months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It started as a friendship, but then we got closer, and I didn't know how to stop." Each word felt like a blade digging deeper into my heart. "I didn't want to hurt you, I swear." The emotional toll of our confrontation began to settle over me like a heavy blanket. I thought I was prepared for the truth, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. The woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, was admitting to having an affair. My heart ached with betrayal, and I felt a swell of anger rise within me. I was devastated, and yet a small part of me felt liberated. The truth had finally come out into the open, and I could now take control of my own narrative. For the next several minutes, Rachel continued to plead her case, attempting to justify her actions while I stood there, emotionally drained but resolute. "I can fix this, Jake. I'll do anything," she said, her voice trembling. "I love you and I want to make it right." But I was no longer listening. I had spent far too long trying to make sense of her words, trying to convince myself that we could work through this together. I realized now that love wasn't enough when trust had been shattered. "You say you love me, but you've betrayed me in the worst possible way." "I can't just forget that," I said, my words cold and deliberate. "It's not that simple." Our conversation spiraled into a heated argument filled with accusations and defensive retorts. I told her how her betrayal had made me question everything: the life we built, the home we shared, and the future I thought we had. I saw hurt flash across her face, and for a brief moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But it quickly turned into anger. I felt like I was staring into the eyes of a stranger. Eventually, the argument simmered down, leaving us in a tense silence. Rachel's face was streaked with tears, and I realized that I was at a crossroads. I had to make a decision about what came next. The emotions swirling around inside me were intense, but I knew I wasn't ready to just let it go. I needed to figure out how to move forward, and that meant making a choice. I took a deep breath, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "I think it's time for us to take a break," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like ashes in my mouth, but I knew it was the right decision. I need space to think about everything that's happened, to process it all. Rachel's face fell, and I could see the panic rising within her. "Please, don't do this. I can change. I'll do anything," she pleaded, but I had made up my mind. I needed to step away from the chaos to gather my thoughts and figure out who I was outside of our marriage. As I turned away from her, I felt an unexpected weight lift from my shoulders. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control of my life. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but I was ready to confront them. I knew I had a journey ahead of me, one that would require me to redefine my self-worth, reclaim my dignity, and ultimately decide what kind of future I wanted to build. The days following my decision to take a break felt surreal. I moved into the spare bedroom, setting up a makeshift space that reflected my inner turmoil. The familiar warmth of our home was replaced with a cold, unwelcoming atmosphere. It was odd, being physically close to Rachel but feeling miles apart. She would knock on the door occasionally, asking if I wanted to talk, but I kept the door firmly closed. I needed time to think, to breathe without the weight of her betrayal hanging over me. As the initial shock of our confrontation wore off, I began to experience an emotional roller coaster. Some days were filled with anger and disbelief, while others left me feeling utterly lost. I'd catch myself staring at old photos, memories of happier times that now felt tainted. I missed the woman I had married, the one who laughed freely and shared dreams of our future. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that perhaps I had been looking at a mirage. Rachel tried to reach out, sending texts filled with apologies and promises to change. "I'll go to counseling, Jake. I'll do anything to fix this," she wrote one evening. Part of me wanted to believe her, but the other part, guarded and bruised, rejected her overtures. I couldn't simply forgive and forget. Trust, once broken, is a delicate thing. It doesn't mend easily, and I wasn't ready to let myself be vulnerable again. In the midst of all this, I found solace in talking to friends who had been supportive through the ordeal. I confided in my best friend Tom, who had always been a sounding board for my frustrations. "You're doing the right thing, man," he told me one evening over beers. "You deserve better. Don't let her manipulate you into thinking you have to give her another chance just because she's crying. It's about your happiness now." His words resonated with me, helping to solidify my resolve. I started to see how much I had lost myself in trying to make Rachel happy, often neglecting my own needs and feelings. It was time to prioritize me. I began to focus on what I wanted, taking small steps toward rebuilding my self-esteem. I started exercising and picking up hobbies I had long abandoned, things that brought me joy and helped me rediscover who I was outside of my role as a husband. But the emotional impact of Rachel's betrayal lingered. I would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, battling with my thoughts. Did I really want to end our marriage? What if I regretted my decisions down the line? The uncertainties gnawed at me, and I felt torn between the man I was becoming and the life I had built with Rachel. One fateful weekend, as I was finally starting to regain a sense of normalcy, I received a text from her that would change everything. "Jake, I really need to talk to you. I don't want to keep fighting. Can we please meet?" My heart raced at the thought of facing her again. Part of me dreaded the encounter, but another part was curious about what Rachel had to say. I reluctantly agreed to meet her. We chose a local park, a neutral space where we could sit on a bench and talk without the emotional baggage of our home weighing us down. As I approached, I saw her sitting there, her head downcast, fidgeting with her hands. The sight of her stirred a mixture of emotions inside me, anger, sadness, but also a glimmer of the love I once felt. "Hey," I said cautiously as I sat down next to her. She looked up, and I could see the bags under her eyes, the telltale signs of sleepless nights. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I wasn't sure what to expect," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What did you want to talk about?" Rachel took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself for whatever she was about to say. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since you moved out. I realized how much I took you for granted, how selfish I was. I want to be honest with you. I've started seeing a therapist and I'm working through my issues. I know I hurt you, but I'm committed to change." Her words were sincere, but I couldn't help but feel cautious. "Rachel, you've said you would change before. Each time things went back to the way they were. Why should I believe you this time?" "I know it's hard to trust me," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. It's going to take time and I'm willing to put in the work. I just want a chance to show you that I can be better." I listened intently, wanting desperately to believe her, but my heart remained guarded. The emotional impact of her betrayal was still fresh, and I wasn't sure if I could handle the pain of another cycle of hope and disappointment. "I appreciate you taking steps to address your issues," I said carefully, choosing my words. "But I can't make any promises. I need to think about what I want too. This isn't just about you, it's about both of us." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand. I just hope you can see that I'm trying to make things right." As the sun began to set, casting a soft glow over the park, I felt a mixture of emotions swirling within me. I knew that this moment was a turning point, not just for Rachel but for me as well. The path ahead was uncertain, but I realized I was finally starting to prioritize my feelings. I had taken control of my life, and whether or not I chose to reconcile with Rachel, I would be moving forward. As we parted ways that day, I felt an unusual sense of empowerment. I had the power to choose my future, to reclaim my happiness. And while the journey was far from over, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next. I could either allow Rachel back into my life or let her go for good. In the end, I had to decide what was best for me. After that meeting with Rachel, I felt a strange mix of hope and caution. On one hand, I appreciated her willingness to seek help and acknowledge her mistakes. On the other hand, a nagging voice in the back of my head reminded me of all the hurt she had caused. I was at a crossroads, contemplating if I could truly rebuild something that had been shattered. Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. I threw myself into work, picked up more shifts, and engaged with friends more. I started to feel a sense of normalcy creeping back into my life, even if it was bittersweet. Rachel would text me now and then, sharing updates about her therapy sessions and how she was trying to change. Sometimes I felt a flicker of something, a longing perhaps, but I quickly extinguished it with memories of her betrayal. One evening, I decided to meet up with Tom for dinner. We went to our usual spot, a local diner, and I began to vent about my feelings. "I don't know, man. Part of me wants to believe her, to give her another chance. But the other part is screaming at me to run for the hills," I admitted, rubbing my forehead in frustration. Tom nodded, his expression serious. "Jake, it's your call. Just remember that actions speak louder than words. If she's truly committed to changing, it'll show over time. But don't let her manipulate you into thinking you owe her another chance just because she's sad now." His words resonated with me, and I left the diner feeling more grounded. I knew I had to prioritize my own healing. I started going to a support group for spouses dealing with infidelity. It was a room filled with raw emotion, people sharing their stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and, eventually, healing. I found solace in the shared experiences, realizing I wasn't alone. It bolstered my resolve to focus on myself before making any decisions about Rachel. As the weeks turned into months, Rachel continued to reach out, hopping to meet up to talk, to explain herself further. I remained noncommittal, responding to her texts without diving too deep into emotional territory. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, but I also didn't want to shut the door completely. It was a delicate balancing act, one that felt exhausting. One day, out of the blue, Rachel sent me a text asking if I would be willing to join her at a therapy session. "I think it would be helpful for you to hear how I'm processing everything," she wrote. I hesitated, torn between wanting to support her and fearing it might lead me back into a cycle of pain. After a long internal debate, I decided to go. When I arrived at the therapist's office, I felt a wave of nerves wash over me. The room was cozy, filled with warm colors and soft lighting. I sat on a couch across from Rachel, who looked anxious but determined. The therapist introduced herself and explained how the session would work, emphasizing the importance of honesty and communication. Rachel spoke first, detailing her feelings of guilt and regret. She described how the affair had made her reevaluate her life and her priorities. I listened, taking in her words but remaining guarded. I realized now that I had been using my problems as an excuse to avoid facing the issues in our marriage. She said, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry for how I hurt you and I want to make it right." When it was my turn to speak, I felt the weight of my emotions pressing down on me. "I appreciate you sharing, Rachel, but the truth is I'm still struggling with the betrayal. I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I admitted, my voice steady, though my heart raced. "It's hard to reconcile the woman I loved with the person who broke my trust." The therapist guided us through a discussion about boundaries, trust, and the work involved to rebuild a relationship. Throughout the session, I could see Rachel was genuinely trying, but the old scars were still fresh in my mind. I was stuck in this strange limbo, caught between the memories of who she had been and the reality of who she was now. After the session, Rachel and I sat in the car, the air thick with unspoken words. "How did it feel?" she asked hesitantly, glancing at me. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "It was good to hear you talk about your feelings, but it doesn't change what happened. I still need time, Rachel. I'm not ready to jump back into anything." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I understand. I just hope you can see that I'm trying. I'm committed to changing, to becoming a better person." As I drove home, my mind raced. I was slowly coming to terms with the fact that Rachel's journey of self-discovery might not align with my timeline for healing. I didn't want to rush into anything, but I also didn't want to shut her out completely. Over the next few weeks, I continued to attend therapy and support group sessions. I focused on my own growth, learning to set boundaries and prioritize what I truly wanted. Meanwhile, I exchanged occasional messages with Rachel. I could sense her frustration as she wanted to see progress in our relationship, but I felt a newfound strength in asserting my needs. Then, one rainy evening, I received a text from Rachel that sent a jolt through me. "Jake, I need you to know that I've been working hard on myself. I've made some changes and I hope you can see that. Can we talk?" I paused, caught off guard by the urgency in her message. Part of me wanted to respond with enthusiasm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to guard my heart. Instead of immediately replying, I took some time to think it over. What did I want from this conversation? Was I truly ready to hear what she had to say? In the end, I decided that I owed it to both of us to meet again, to see where Rachel was on her journey. I didn't know what the future held, but I felt it was time to take another step forward, if not for reconciliation, then for closure. After all the pain, all the heartache, perhaps it was time to finally confront the reality of our marriage and decide if there was a path forward, or if it was time to let go for good. As I prepared to meet Rachel again, I felt a mix of trepidation and anticipation. It had been weeks since our last conversation, and I was eager to see how much she had truly changed. We decided to meet at a quiet cafe, a place that had once been our go-to spot for lazy Sunday brunches. Walking in, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me, mixed with the bitter taste of betrayal. When I spotted Rachel at a corner table, my heart skipped a beat. She looked different. There was a new confidence in her demeanor, but also an air of vulnerability. As I approached, I could see her fidgeting with her coffee cup, deep in thought. "Hey," I greeted her, forcing a smile despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Hi, Jake," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with nervous energy. "Thank you for meeting me." We made small talk about mundane topics at first, the weather, recent events, but I could sense the tension simmering beneath the surface. Eventually, Rachel took a deep breath, her expression shifting to one of seriousness. "I wanted to share some things I've been working on. I've been seeing my therapist regularly, and I've had a lot of time to reflect on my actions." I nodded, urging her to continue. I've realized that my affair wasn't just about wanting something new. It was about my own insecurities and fears. I thought I could find validation in someone else without considering the consequences. She confessed, her eyes locking onto mine with sincerity. I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I've been working on being honest with myself and taking responsibility for my actions. It was hard to hear those words, but I appreciated her willingness to acknowledge her mistakes. Rachel, I've seen you try to make changes, I admitted cautiously. I've noticed how much effort you're putting into understanding yourself. But what I need to know is, do you understand how deeply your actions affected me? Trust isn't easily rebuilt. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I do understand. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how my choices impacted not just our marriage but also our family. I can't change the past, but I want to take steps to make things right. I want to be someone you can trust again. Her vulnerability struck a chord within me. I had longed for this moment, to hear her take accountability. But as I looked into her eyes, I also felt the weight of all the unresolved issues we faced. I can't promise that I'll forgive you or that we'll just go back to how things were. I'm still hurt, Rachel. I need time to figure out what I want. I said, my voice firm but compassionate. I understand, she replied, her expression shifting from desperation to acceptance. I don't want you to rush into anything. I just want you to know that I'm committed to becoming a better person, whether that means with you or on my own. I know I've messed up and I'm willing to work for it. We sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. I could feel a sense of clarity washing over me. This meeting was important, but it wasn't about reconciliation. It was about honesty and setting boundaries. I want to focus on healing for both of us, I finally said. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I need to put myself first for a while. Rachel nodded, a bittersweet smile on her face. I get it, Jake, and I'll respect your decision. I just hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. As we finished our coffee, I felt lighter, as though I had shed a layer of the emotional burden I had been carrying. I was no longer the victim of her betrayal. I was reclaiming my narrative. Whether or not Rachel and I would find a way back to each other remained uncertain, but I knew I was on a path to rediscovering myself. In the weeks that followed, I continued to attend therapy and focus on my personal growth. I built stronger connections with friends and family, allowing them to support me as I navigated this new chapter of my life. I began to find joy in my own pursuits again, hobbies I had neglected, time spent with my kids, and the simple pleasures of life. One day, while cleaning out old boxes in the garage, I stumbled upon a photo album filled with memories of happier times. As I flipped through the pages, I felt a mix of nostalgia and acceptance. Those memories were a part of my past, but they didn't define my future. I realized that I had the power to let go of the hurt and forge a new path, whether that involved Rachel or not. I reached out to Rachel occasionally, checking in on her progress. We shared updates about our lives, but I kept my emotional distance. It was a strange relationship, one filled with both compassion and caution. I wanted her to succeed in her journey, but I also had to prioritize my own healing. As time passed, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Love is important, but it must be accompanied by respect and honesty. I had learned the hard way that I needed to prioritize my own happiness and well-being, no matter what. In the end, I chose to face the future with an open heart but a cautious mind. Whether Rachel and I would find our way back to each other remained uncertain, but I felt a sense of peace knowing that I was taking control of my life. I had emerged from the darkness of betrayal and was ready to embrace whatever came next, stronger and wiser than before.